and welcome to Friends with Deficits. I'm your host, Adam Sultan, and my next friend is Emma Red March Rose. She is an actor, writer, comedian, librarian. Seems like she's educated in a lot of things, and that's what we're here to talk about. You can learn more about her at her website, emmaredmarchrose.com. That's a lot to chew on. I guess we'll just start from there. You ought to tell me what I should call you, because I've got Emma Marie Red March Rose.
Yes, I go by many names. I go by Red, but then my government name is Emma. I was born Emma Rose, which kind of sounds like the made-up one. As a performer, I feel like it's so hard to find people online. So there's a lot of Emma Roses out there.
Right. Okay.
And I've kind of gone by Red on and off my whole life, because I'm redheaded also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking with me, for one thing. Also, when you had reached out, you kind of described how you hadn't really told your story or felt like this would be really vulnerable. And then I saw your 30 years and 30 minutes video. 30 days, 30 minutes.
Oh my God. Yeah. I don't think anyone's seen that.
Well,
that blows me away.
Yeah. And there's so much info that I was like, either A, do you have more, or B, do you want to kind of like go deeper with that stuff? I mean, it's kind of completely up to you what you want to talk about.
Well, I guess I just think the childhood education is so fascinating to me. And I feel like the older I get, the more I realize how much it differed from most people's experiences growing up. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there is a community out there. And so I feel like being able to more comfortably talk about it on platforms like this is going to help me one day find that community better, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I think there are probably people in the similar boat too.
And we're not talking about like homeschooling per se.
Right. It's a little bit more than that, I would say. Yeah. What I call it is unschooling.
Yeah. It's a little less than that, maybe.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
The lack thereof education, I should say.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You want to tell me like where it all began?
Oh, yeah. I guess. Yeah, so I was born at home in a trailer in North Carolina, in the same city as Danny McBride.
Wow.
If that says anything.
Did you grow up in a trailer?
Oh, I grew up in so many places. I lived in trailers and apartments and houses and all kinds of things. Actually, I'm hoping to celebrate this coming February will be the longest I've lived in one dwelling at one time. I just celebrated a year this month.
Wow, you haven't lived in a place more than a year in 30 odd years?
Yeah, pretty much. It'll be maybe like 15 months, because I think there was a couple month a month, but there was also years where I moved multiple times in 1 year too. So it's been wild. I think it's been about like 32, something like that, moves. It's been wild.
Did you live in a lot of different states, cities, countries?
Yeah, I lived always in the United States, but I lived in Illinois for a while, North Carolina for a while, Alabama, and then back now in Illinois, and kind of each of those places in between a little bit too.
Wow.
I bounced around.
And are you in your Chicago metro area of Illinois now?
Yes. Cool. Yeah, I love it so much. That's where it's wild to think that the longest I've lived somewhere is in Chicago now. That's wild. But I live in North Chicago, right near the beach. It's lovely, especially right now. It's so gorgeous.
All right. Well, we just jumped way ahead 30 years. So
yeah, it's a mess anyway.
Okay, let's get back to the trailer.
Oh man, yeah. So, and it's like I hear neither of my parents. I love my parents. Oh, spoiler alert. Mm-hmm. No, but they're not great communicators. I'll put it that way. So I feel like a lot of the things that I've learned about my childhood are either from like experience or from like the few odd people that were witnesses to it, because I moved so much and wasn't in school consistently. So it's been interesting like piecing it all together. But basically when I was born, my mom didn't want me to have like a social security number or anything. She didn't really want me like on the grid.
Were you an only child?
No, I was the fourth.
Wow.
I know, which is so funny. I don't know. Maybe she was like, these ones are they already have social security numbers. We don't need to do one for the last one. And like, I wasn't vaccinated. I was born at home. I actually had an extra finger when I was born. So my mom, got rid of that.
Wait, you had witchcraft or surgery?
Yeah, exactly. A little at-home surgery. And it's interesting too. I was thinking about this the other day because I was like, if she was like so sure that the apocalypse was going to happen, I feel like I would have been like a king if I had 11 fingers in the apocalypse.
Yeah.
You know, like a saying about that, like in a land of the 10-fingered people, the person with 11 something. I don't know.
The extra pinky is king.
That's right. That's right.
Did she really actually take it off herself, or did you go?
Yeah, she took it off. She has always bred dogs, toy poodles, my whole life.
Uh-huh.
So she had been docking tails.
Not
forever.
the same, Emma.
Same thing. Finger, tail. It's just a little fleshy bone thing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just glad they can count.
Was this like when you were really young, an infant?
Yeah, they did it when I was an infant. I think they did it within the first like couple weeks.
Oh.
It was probably like umbilical cord, a finger, in that order, maybe. I don't know.
And they also, like you just had a home birth, a trailer home birth?
Yeah, I'm told I had a doula, but yeah, I don't, I wonder about that person if they were, what their qualifications were, like knowing my mom and stuff. She's very holistic. She's not she doesn't like doctors very much. So we didn't really go to doctors like growing up either much.
Had any of your siblings were they born in hospitals, or was it all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were all born in hospitals. And I'm pretty sure she like took her dogs to get rabies shots. And I'm like, hey, where were you on this one? Like, go get me vaccinated.
Were your siblings vaccinated too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if it was just like just a oversight or a laziness. And then later they were like, let's tell her that we really had a good reason.
So have you brought it up to them ever?
My mom is still pretty staunchly anti-vax.
Okay. So
it's not a super positive conversation.
Yeah.
And then my dad is the sweetest man, most useless man. So when I bring it up to him, he's just basically like, oh, yeah, oh, I had no idea. It's basically his response to everything. It's just like a very positive, I had no idea. But, yeah, so it's interesting.
And I guess she hasn't gotten modern vaxes of the last 3 or 4 years?
No. She actually I do some stand-up. I say anti-vaxxer. I don't even know her. And then I say, just kidding, she's my mom. Bazing. And so, yeah, she's like, I think she's almost done it a couple times and then backed out a couple times, but who's to say?
Well, as long as she's healthy, I guess.
Yeah, healthy as a horse, she's probably gonna live forever.
Wow. All right. Maybe there's something to this anti-vax thing. Oh, and I'm canceled.
No. Yeah. Wait, we're that kind of podcast now? No.
Yeah, no. Anyway, all right.
Yes. So it was interesting. I think I went to a Christian kindergarten for a couple months at around 5.
Are your parents religious, or? My
dad became agnostic, I think, when I was pretty young, probably like 3 or 4. Uh-huh. That's what happens when you have a redheaded child. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. There is no God. No, no, but he became agnostic, and he's been pretty comfortably agnostic for most of my life. And then my mom has basically been every religion under the sun, and probably the sun religions. So she baptized me a lot, different religions and different churches. She was Jewish for a while and Catholic mostly, Lutheran and Baptist, and recently agnostic herself, which is an interesting turn of events. I did not see that coming.
Wow.
Yeah, just last couple of years, she called me. She was excited. She was like, "Guess what?" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "There is no God." And I was like, "Okay." She's like, "Now I can believe in Santa Claus," which very confused me. But I said, "Okay, great." So yeah, but growing up, I think she was more comfortable with Christian schools than public schools. Uh-huh. She wanted to shelter us, and me specifically, so much. I don't know. I wonder if she grew up in public school until high school and then went to a Catholic high school. And I feel like that probably was not a great combination. So she's 60 now. So back in the day, the stories I've heard from both my parents actually in schools were pretty negative. I mean, it's interesting looking back now. I would think that some of the abuse and treatment that they received, I might think would have happened from other students, but it was happening from teachers. Like my dad has told me stories about growing up and being the class clown, but then when he would get in trouble, his teacher would like keep him under her desk and kick him every time he made noise.
Jesus.
And he would tell me about like, oh, I remember her big old, big black shoes and stuff. And I'm like, that's not okay.
No.
So they don't even point to that. But I've wondered, if that had a lot to do with it too. Because my mom, growing up in the Catholic schools, I know she had a really hard time with the nuns were not afraid of, a little physical reprimanding.
Yeah.
So it's a bummer. And so I kind of get it in some regards. Like, not a great execution on their part, I'd say. But I think it was out of protection. Just misguided.
Yeah.
So we did Christian and Seventh-day Adventist schools right away. The Seventh-day Adventist school was interesting because I went back to that school several times. I went in kindergarten for a couple months, in first grade for a couple months, fifth grade for a couple months. And when I went in fifth grade, I was the only fifth grader in the whole school. So I pretty much just was mostly at home, I'd say, throughout the school year. But I've probably been to, maybe 8 or 9 or 10 schools.
Wasn't that illegal? Hasn't that been? I mean...
Yeah, we would get, told not to go outside during the day and not to speak to police officers. And if you saw somebody, run the other way. But I like to go outside, so I would just go outside and explore. And if I saw people, I'd run away.
Didn't the schools themselves come looking for you, I guess, or?
No, and I wondered if that's a big part of the reason that my parents moved to North Carolina from Illinois. Because the laws are very, very different. And they moved there the year before I was born. I was the only one of my siblings to be born in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And so they... Actually, I remember when the major laws got upgraded. It was in 2015, I want to say. There was a pretty tragic event, and it's actually incredibly related to this whole story because it's unfortunate, and it's a direct result from the lack of laws in North Carolina. But basically there was a girl named Erica Parsons in my hometown of like Salisbury, North Carolina, which is what I basically consider my hometown because I lived in and around that area so much. But this girl went missing. She was 13 when she went missing, and she had physical and developmental differences and was being homeschooled, basically. And before all of this fiasco with her, you didn't really have to take end of year tests. I think I might have done that one time when we lived in Alabama, but in North Carolina, we didn't have to take any end of year tests. People would ask me what grade I'm in. I'd say, I don't know. I'd kind of look at somebody else and be like, what grade am I supposed to be in? But basically, Erica Parsons went missing, and they didn't find out that she was missing for 2 years because her adoptive parents had been cashing her check for being from the state for having adopted her, and then also not reporting that she was missing. Her older brother ended up reporting it, who we knew, it's a small town, so I knew her older brother. And basically he told, this sounds kind of wild, but he told a friend of mine, my parents killed my sister and no one knows. And we were teenagers at the time, so we kind of just were like, he's crazy. And he was a wild kid at the time. I don't mean to judge, obviously he had a really rough time. But so we kind of didn't believe him and just kind of moved on with our lives. And then a couple years later, he went to the police and said, this is what happened. And his parents got arrested, but they basically said that she had went off to live with her grandmother a couple years ago, and they had lost touch with her. But the story had so many holes, and it was such a mess. They actually ended up going on Dr. Phil. Really? And Yeah. And then eventually the police found out that, they found her body. And it was just really unfortunate that it took that long for her to come to any justice, for them to find out what happened. And so that year in December, a lot of the homeschooling and like basically record keeping of human beings got an overhaul, which is great. Just so like kids like this don't just kind of disappear. There's like, it would have been so easy, like looking back at my childhood, there weren't a lot of peers that I was around, teachers, guardians, like around. It was basically, kind of anything could have happened.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It still surprised me. I would think that the education system would keep tracks of this, that
Yeah, you'd think.
CPS would come over and say like, your kid's been truant for 3 years or.
Yeah, it's insane. And I think what it is it's just, one, a lack of resources and just a lack of accountability, and of course, a lack of accountability is literally what we're talking about, but, but like from the CPS workers, from the government. Because I was a children's library. I'm a children's librarian now. I was a librarian in North Carolina for 10 years. And so I was working for the government, for the county. And when you're in it, it makes a lot of sense that there would be this much oversight, because it's just a lot of very overworked people that care a lot, that just don't have the time to keep up with all of it. And then it's also, people that are very comfortable in the job and are not really that motivated anymore, or burned out from working so hard for so long. Just not a lot of resources down there, and not a lot of, I feel like, great examples, not a lot of inspiration to do the right thing, I feel like, down there sometimes. You go the extra mile. It's hard.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people slipping through the cracks.
Obviously, you have more to say, because I'm just a little bit surprised, I guess, that you obviously didn't slip through the cracks, and you don't at all sound like you were uneducated in any way. So.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate. When I was 16, I enrolled myself in our community college.
Uh-huh. And
I kind of had to like forge some of the paperwork, which I always wonder. I'm like, they're going to take away all my degrees, because now I'm like, so I had to say like claim religious exemption, because I hadn't gotten the vaccines, because I tried to get them, but it takes a really long time. And I've started the process and everything, but there's not a lot I can get now. But that was a big gatekeeping issue. Getting into public schools. I actually did go to public school. We'll get back to that. Okay. But I started community college at 16, did all the paperwork. They had a dual enrollment program. So as a homeschooler, I could take 2 free classes each semester. So I took about a year of that, and then I graduated, quote unquote, high school, which was great, because it was my mom typing up a transcript on Word and then mailing it to the state. That was the whole thing. No graduation other than that. And then
did you have to pass anything, GRE or?
Nope. She just put A.
Oh, because you were
chemistry,
homeschooled.
A.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, great. What's chemistry? Awesome. But I was able to. I didn't have to take the SAT because I was already enrolled at the community college.
Uh-huh.
And so I just continued on. And got my associates there. And then once I had the associates, I was able to enroll at a university in Greensboro. And so I went there and did my undergrad in psychology, and then continued on, did my graduate, got my master's in library and information studies at 23. And I wonder about that, because I didn't have any burnout whatsoever when I started college. It was so exhilarating and new and fresh, and I was so committed. And so I wonder about that sometimes too, if some people that have been day in and day out in school for their entire childhoods and then how are expected to like thrive in college.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's got to be tough. I mean, that's like one silver lining that I take from it, I guess, is that college was really satisfying, I feel like.
Well, that's rare you hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm definitely fortunate there. And yeah, I love education. I work in it now and everything as a public children's librarian. So I did go to public school. And I think that's an interesting caveat too. I went just one time for about 3 months in 5th grade. And it was basically to learn about anatomy. And your body. It was that class. My mom was like, I don't want to talk to you about that. So this is the one time you're going to public school. And then I just remember drawing a bunch of diagrams for all my homeschool friends, being like, look at this. I figured it out before any of you. And it was great because there was a homeschool association that my mother put me in at like 12, 13. And that was a huge step in the right direction because that did get me a little bit access to peers. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about homeschool associations, I feel like, is that you have like, it's an interesting demographic usually of children that you're going to associate with, I guess, because people have very different reasons for homeschooling. Yeah. So basically it's a very curated group of kids. You're around other homeschoolers. You're not going to be around normal kids. We all know. Yeah.
How does a homeschool association work anyway? Do families in a neighborhood just sign up or find each other and have meetings or? Yeah,
I wonder if it worked better, of course, with the internet, I think. Mm-hmm. Made a big difference. And so, yeah, what we would do is we'd have PE once a week for a little while, and we'd all get together for like an hour or two and like play kickball. And there was no coach or anything. Mm-hmm. It was just all of us at a park. And most of the time it would just end up being LARP. So, because like all the homeschool boys all had like cardboard swords. All the girls were like, we want to go to school. And too bad. No, but yeah, that was a positive thing. And homeschooling in the South has become more and more and more prevalent. And another big reason for that I feel like I see a lot is that we want to believe that there are private schools, private Christian schools, and public schools, and that there is a separation of church and state. But in the South, in the Bible Belt, like North Carolina, Alabama, South Carolina, the lines are still blurred if you look closely, I guess. And so if you don't want your children to have like at least that flavor of Christianity, then you kind of can't put them in public school in the South, I feel like. I mean, probably, I'm not going to say that. In Raleigh, Charlotte, Winston-Salem, I would probably feel different in some of like the major metropolitan areas, but in like the rural areas. As a result of all of this, there was, of course, some social anxiety and some, a lot of social deficits more than I think educational. Like I don't think looking back, it was so important for me to know history. No, I know some history, but as it was probably to be socialized on a regular basis, because I was pretty mute till I was like 25, on and off. I had a hard time.
What do you mean by mute?
Well, I spoke very, very, very quietly, and then also just sometimes not at all. It was really difficult for me to speak to people. I would just get so nervous, and it kind of was like a joke.
Did I hear this right from one of your episodes on YouTube? I think that you barked at some point, like as a child, or was that just a joke?
I think I was a dog for a while. See, the thing is, there was a few years there between like birth and like probably like 4 or 5 where we weren't around other kids. All my siblings were older, so they kind of didn't want to play with me. But my friends were this group of these 7 dogs, and we just all ran around together for the first couple of years, I feel like. So honestly, I don't know, man. And my mom was a dog groomer, so I worked for her so much. But then when I was really young, I was at the shop all the time, and it's just, it was just like one of the pack.
So did you have any developmental language issues, or did you just choose to act like a dog and run around with your friends, but you were still at the right language equivalent for your age?
That's a great question. And I think there's a lot of data like this that I'm kind of never going to have because I wasn't going to doctors or going to any kind of therapists or around any guardians who would like make that distinction. Because it's like I had a really close friend growing up that I would speak to regularly, but like I'd get around her parents or like other people, and I would just smile really big, and I just couldn't say anything. And it's fascinating. I ran into another homeschooler a couple years ago, and we like had coffee, and we were just kind of talking about how bizarre it was. We were in the same association, and he was also barely spoke, and he was like, "Yeah, I just would just keep a big smile on my face just to tell people I'm friendly and approachable." And I'd be like, I do the same thing. Like, it's just like, you do learn these like coping mechanisms for sure, like how to interact with people. It's definitely a lot of fawning now. Like you hear fight or flight,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also like fawn, which is like kind of like be as charming as you can.
I heard fight, flight, or freeze, but now fawn, that's another one.
There's like 5 of them now. It's
Oh my
fight,
gosh.
flight, freeze, fawn, and there's another one.
Fuck? Is it fuck? No.
Yes, that's my go-to. That's right. If all else fails,
Yes.
gotta do what you gotta do. Oh my gosh. This is why they couldn't put me in schools. Oh Lord.
Were you a happy child?
I was. And the thing is, it's like, it's hard to measure because when I was around other people, yes, for sure. And so that's, so what is the measurement? When I was alone, no, very sad. And I was alone mostly. So yes. Yeah. It was like kind of how you picture a dog now. It's like when a dog's not home, you just imagine that they're really happy because you don't know. And then when you're around them, of course they're happy because they're happy to see you.
Yeah.
So it kind of doesn't matter. Oh, I can hear it. This is psychologically bad. I'll worry about this later. But I feel like, I think one of the hard things now as like an adult, I'm 30 now,
Mm-hmm.
is like, I think about having a family and kids. And I don't know even now. I'm sure I would put them in school. But it's an interesting to think about because they would be having an experience entirely different than mine, which would be good in a lot of ways. But
And you have educated yourself. I mean, you
yes,
started late, but
that's right. Better late than never.
yeah. Do you feel like there's a benefit to homeschooling kids? I mean, from your experience, is that what you would want for someone, or is it just that you don't want them to have an experience that feels so different from yours?
Actually, nowadays, I think it's entirely different than it ever was or would have been when I was a kid because of the internet. I don't think the social deficit would be there in the same way. It's almost like the capability of being that disconnected is gone. Yeah, so that's kind of comforting. I feel like the people that are homeschooled now are going to be, and and which I did have friends that were homeschooled because their families were hyper religious and they didn't want TV or secular music or anything like that in the house. So they're probably still kind of screwed for a while, but hopefully they'll grow up and find a way into college.
Yeah.
That definitely changed my life for sure.
Was there a pivotal moment in high school or something where you felt like you really have to go to college, get an education? Like, was there a switch from feeling like you're a homeschooled person to being a public school person? Yeah.
It was interesting because my sister she's 5 years older than me. And she's just a very strong person, just like a fighter every step of the way. And so I feel like she kind of instilled it in me that I had to find a way out kind of thing from a young age. And so when I was 15, she helped me enroll in CNA classes. So when I was 16, I got certified as a nurse aide and did some, which is what she did at like 14, so that we could start working and have enough money to be on our own and stuff. Because I love my mom, say it again, I love my mom, but just very unpredictable. And she would sometimes kick us out. So, we kind of had to be prepared for anything.
Were you self-motivated to some degree, or?
Yes. And that's what it was. I was thinking one of the biggest benefits, and this is going to sound like I'm just plugging my business here as a librarian, but it was like books, man. Books made all the difference. I mean, looking back, I don't know what I would have done. Like, I was reading books all the time, and just literally being able to put myself in other people's perspectives on a regular basis made all the difference.
I get that. I used to be truant in high school, but I'd stay on campus and just hide in the library and read.
Oh, yeah. It's the best.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely. And it's like, I think some of this stuff almost feels like some people don't need it, maybe.
Need what?
I guess aren't motivated enough to reach for a book sometimes. But it's almost like if you are motivated in the right ways, and you do grab that book, it's so much more beneficial than kind of if you didn't have that motivation. Basically what I'm getting at is like the overarching question of like, is it better for a child to be put in like difficult situations and the pressure to be on for them to self-motivate and become more than they might have been if they were in a more comfortable circumstance? I guess is what the question of my life, basically. And hopefully I have an answer before I have kids and I don't torture them. Man, this has been so good. Thanks so much for for doing this with me. I wish I had more time. I gotta hop off here soon, but
really? Okay. I feel like it's just funny because you've already told me this is kind of what you wanted to talk about, but then I've researched you to the point enough to know that there's plenty more.
Yes, a little Jack in the Box.
Yeah. Maybe if you'd be willing to talk another time, we could do another
I would love
part
that.
to this. Well, let me ask you this, assuming this might be the only time I have an episode with you on. Something I ask all my guests is, what are the benefits to what you've gone through?
Oh my goodness, yes. I would say for sure it's the lack of burnout in college, but more importantly than that, I think it's the ability to put myself in other people's shoes, not only with all the time and space that I had to read, because that was a lot more time to read than most kids get to, just being at home all day. And then also, I don't know, experiencing that type of loneliness, like extended isolation, is such a specific experience that I don't think a lot of people have. And I had it, and it's over, and I survived. But that, I think, has given me the ability to relate to a very small minority of the population that I think, of course, are the people that need and deserve and want to be related to the most.
Yeah.
So that's my silver lining too. Just, I'm going to reach these people.
And I'll help.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Again, I'd like to thank my guest, Emma Red March Rose. If you want to learn more about her, check out emmaredmarchrose.com. And actually, if you want to have her back on the show, let me know, or let her know, because there's a lot more that needs to be covered, I think. And I also think if you'd like to support the show, one of the best ways is by going to patreon.com/friendswithdeficits, where you can help be part of the community that keeps this show alive and thriving. Patreon.com/friendswithdeficits. Once again, I'm Adam Sultan. It's cool to be here, but I think I hear the bell.